start the countdown to kickoff of the college football season.
Wangu across midfield. Burkins, the kicker, couldn't get him. Can Washington? He shoves him out of bounds. But what a return by Kene Wangu. Here's a big hitter, and it's going to be the first lead of the night for Iowa State. Xavier Hutchinson. Rattler's thrown for 301. Looking deep, looking into double coverage, and he made a critical mistake. It's intercepted by Aishim Young.
It's unsportsmanlike conduct's 25 teams in 25 days.
Listen, we're probably going to need, and I used to do this a lot, especially in the 90s with the Rams, which was a terrible decade until the very end where people forget they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But I would have to, about 3 games into the season, adopt another NFL team. So I at least had something to watch and cheer for going into the month of January.
Basically, you were trying to root against the Dallas Cowboys.
Well, I always do that.
You were usually a Packers fan.
I was always doing that. But yes, you're right.
Go, Pat, go.
Well, Husker fans, if you're looking for a team to jump on the bandwagon and enjoy into the month, hopefully, of January, I nominate the Iowa State University Cyclones.
Clones.
Today's team in 25 teams in 25 days. I mean, they are the scrappy underdog, right? Because not only have they never been to a playoff or played for a national championship, but Texas and Oklahoma basically stabbed them in the heart from behind with a giant sword, and they're trying to leave them for dead. Well, they refuse to go away quietly into the night. And the voice of the Iowa State Cyclones, John Walters, joins us. John, I know that's a long-winded
hello
introduction, but I'm just trying to make the sales point that Iowa State should be the new America's team for this year.
I like that, and there's plenty of room on the bandwagon, so you guys jump on. We'd love to have you, and plenty of seating available on the bandwagon, but no seating available in the stadium. I think we're probably going to be sold out for at least the first 2 games, and I'll be surprised if there's a whole lot of empty seats at any of the games. So there's a lot to be excited about, and yeah, this is a fun team to cheer for because they are a bunch of grinders. It's not like there's a bunch of 5-star guys. I think, what Brees Hall said last year after they beat Texas was, it's 5-star culture versus 5-star athletes, and the culture won. And so, those things are fun when you see those kind of things happen. And obviously, Iowa State fans have been waiting a long, long time for a team like this.
John, let's just go big picture then from the start before diving in position by position. Iowa State and discussing the college football playoff and expectations and winning the league. Like, what has it been like over the last few months? Because there are some teams in this position that really embrace it and talk about it openly. Others that say, hey, we got a game in front of us. We're focusing on that. How has Iowa State balanced that all?
Well, it depends if you ask the fans or the players. If you ask the fans, it's all the prior, and if you ask the players, it's all the latter. I mean, this is a program that doesn't get very far if they start thinking big picture right now, and they really do literally focus on a day at a time, and it's really cliche, but to really be successful, I think you have to do that, and so they're aware. As Matt Campbell says a lot of times, he says we are result aware, but we're process driven, and so that they understand what the expectations are, what people are saying. One thing I've said about Matt, and I'll say it again this season, I've said it throughout his time at Iowa State, the crazier that things are around Matt Campbell, the better he is. So last year, COVID and all the uncertainty and everything, it was a wild, wild west heading into the football season. Are they even going to be playing? What's going to happen? Matt finds a way to get his guys focused on the task at hand, and he was really good throughout all the craziness of last year. And I think this year you can, multiply that by 3 because you've still got COVID hanging around. You've got the highest expectations in the history of the program, and then you got the conference realignment talk, which is another added distraction if you let it be. But I don't think Matt will let it be. And these guys understand so many of them came back specifically to try to play for a championship this year. that I don't think anything's going to, distract them from what they need to focus on right now.
John Walters, the voice of the Iowa State Cyclones in 25 teams in 25 days. How does Brock Purdy balance being that aggressive quarterback we saw in his first couple of years that helped him get to, a level of success? And then last year we saw maybe more the refined one that had Iowa State within a drive of the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, what's funny about it is Brock's numbers a year ago were significantly down in terms of passing yardage from the year before. But Breece Hall was starting to emerge as one of the best players in college football, and there was a lot more balance to the offense. And so Brock wasn't asked to do as much. So statistically, it might not look like he had as good a year as he did 2 years ago. But, 2 years ago, he was the second-team All-Big 12 quarterback, and last year he was the first-team All-Big 12 quarterback. So the coaches around the league respected and valued what Brock brought to that team. And really in the second half of the season, he was lights out. Now, he did throw some interceptions in the Big 12 championship game, and a couple of those were trying to make plays toward the end of the game when you're in a pretty desperate situation. But he is a winner, and he is by far the winningest quarterback at Iowa State, 19-6 against Big 12 competition, and no other quarterback even comes close to that in Iowa State history. So, I think about Brock, and I was thinking about him today. The guy has accounted for 80 touchdowns in his career, okay? 68 passing, 62 passing, 18 rushing. He's accounted for 80 touchdowns entering his senior season. But maybe the biggest play he's made, when I thought about that, the get ready to face UNI, was just diving on a fumble, and that's the kind of plays that he makes all the time. And if he didn't do that, Iowa State probably doesn't beat Northern Iowa a couple of years ago. So, this guy makes winning plays, whether it's with his speed, his arm, regardless, he is a winner, and Matt Campbell couldn't be more excited to have him back for his fourth year as a starter.
John, is really the biggest question to answer on offense just maybe finding some more consistent, reliable options beyond Xavier Hutchinson at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Last year they really relied heavily on Xavier Hutchinson, and Tariq Milton was injured. He's back now. So I think that adds a guy that, 2 years ago averaged better than 20 yards a catch. So he's a big play guy that you add back in that M position, which is a really, slot receiver is a very important part of what Matt Campbell's historically done offensively. And so I think Tariq Milton coming back will be big. Joe Skates is really starting to emerge. There's a young guy in the program out of Kansas City, Jalen Knoll, that they're really, really excited about. So I do think there's more options now for Brock when he looks for receivers. And the other part of that equation is, too, will Iowa State play more sets that involve more than one receiver? A lot of times last year, because Dylan Stainer was one of the best players in the program, they played 3 tight end sets. And it was fun to watch, and it created all kinds of matchup problems for opponents. But Stainer's with the Saints now, and so it's, okay, probably going to be a little bit more of your traditional 2 tight end sets and 2 receivers. And so I think there's a real opportunity there for another receiver to emerge. I think Joe Skates and Tariq Milton are 2 really good candidates for that.
John, other side of the ball, you look at big plays allowed, and on CFBstats.com, you can look at all sorts of numbers, whether it's plays of 10 yards or more or all the way up to plays of 90 yards or more. For most of those metrics, Iowa State's usually hanging around, half in the country in the 60s. Sometimes they're a little bit lower. How big of a discussion point has limiting those big plays been this year as the defense looks to take that next step in the Big 12?
Yeah, I think part of it's just John Haycock's philosophy. He is going to force you to beat him. And if you make a few plays and get a few first downs, okay. But usually they tighten the screws pretty well down by the end zone. The other thing he does, and he's really, really good at this, is just, kind of getting a feel early in the game for what an opponent wants to do. And then as the game wears on, taking that away. If you look at Iowa State's last 5 games last season, and we're talking about some pretty good competition, it included a win at Texas, the game against Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game, Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. So, the last 5 games that Iowa State played last season, they allowed a total of 16 points in the second half. So the defense adjusted very well to what opponents were trying to do early in the game, and maybe some of those opponents had some success early, but once Coach Haycock kind of got it figured out, he was very good at making those adjustments and taking things away. Occasionally they're going to give up big plays, but I mean, really, their numbers statistically, defensively, have been excellent ever since they switched to that three-man front a few years ago, and they continue to be. And I think it starts with rush defense, and they led the Big 12 in rush defense a year ago, and were 8th nationally. And if you can stop the run and you can run the football yourself, I think college football has changed a ton over the years, but one thing that really hasn't changed is if you can run the ball and you can stop the run, you're probably going to win the majority of your games, and I think that's what Coach Haycock's so good at.
And running the ball when the guy like Breece Hall has been, pardon the pun, a breeze for Iowa State. I know, it was too easy.
Come on.
But you look at not only that, but the fact that Trevor Downing, who missed most of last year, is back, and it was already a good offensive line to begin with. I mean, are there Iowa State folks scratching their heads as far as when's the last time we had an offensive line that had this kind of potential?
Yes. Yes, there are. You're exactly right. I mean, last year, Iowa State was one of 11 finalists for the Joe Moore Award, going to the best offensive line in college football. I don't think anybody saw that coming prior to the season, especially after Trevor Downing, their best offensive lineman, got hurt game one and missed the rest of the season. But Coach Campbell, when he took the job, he said, that'll be the part that takes a while. It's not going to be fixed overnight. It's going to be a 4 or 5 year process before you start seeing the results on the field of their offensive line recruiting and development. And we really saw it start to hit the field a year ago where some guys who were green that got in there and they played very well. And so now all those guys are back. Plus you had Trevor Downing, and you've got some really good young guys in the system that are starting to emerge and challenge some of those older guys. And so there's a ton of competition. And Coach Campbell said he's got 11 guys that he could trust right now to be starters on that offensive line. And I've never heard that number thrown out. And he doesn't throw that stuff out too loosely either. So that's a big, big jump in what the depth and quality is on that offensive line. And this should be Iowa State's best offensive line. Now, you say that, you never know. The season could start, guys could get hurt, or, things might look different. But on paper, this looks like the best offensive line that Iowa State's been able to put together.
John, in all sincerity, there are a lot of people in our audience who aren't Cyclone fans right now who are going to be rooting for Iowa State this year, and I think you are in for a fun season. Not that last year wasn't fun, but this year the Cyclone Nation will be back in full force in the stadium, and the promise could be for a very special year. I am jealous, but we'll be watching from afar. Best wishes, and thanks for the preview.
Happy to do it, guys. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John.
John Walters, the voice of Iowa State.
Couple things stood out to me when looking at this team today. In the athletic write-up, which was done by, I believe it was our friend Max Olson. It was indeed late June. He wrote about the kickoff game, which is something we've talked about a lot. They brought in a new kicker from Fordham, which is just amazing. Andrew, either Mevis or Mevis, but reading Max, is a game changer who can resolve one of their great flaws. No team in FBS had to cover more kickoffs, 56, than Iowa State last season. Their kickoff specialist produced just 10 touchbacks over 12 games. They gave up 3 return touchdowns last season, 2 of which swung the loss to Louisiana. It's more than that, though. It's also the field position advantage they gave up in some of their biggest games. At Fordham, Mevis booted touchbacks on 50 of his 63 kickoffs. Of course, this is back now in 2019. Incredible numbers there. Incredible numbers from Max. And, as we have spent so much time talking about that, that resonated with me. One more thing, too. We talked about the importance of Illinois for Nebraska. What happens if they lose that game? Where do they go from there? I do wonder. I think they're going to beat Iowa this year. I do. It's not just me rooting for it. I actually think Iowa State will win. But if they lose in week 2, how do they respond to that is something that I really, really wonder about. Because biggest matchup that these two schools will have ever had together.
Yes.
And if they win, they're still in the playoff mix.
Well, if they win, Josh, it's set up.
Oh, that schedule sets
because
up well.
the schedule, and I know Iowa State has had stumbles not beyond Iowa, but they've lost some games maybe they shouldn't have lost early in the season. But then It's fairly navigable. Is that the right word?
Navigatable?
Navigable waters.
Yeah. You can navigate the waters, Nick.
After Iowa until November, when you finish with Texas, Texas Tech on the road, Oklahoma on the road, and home against TCU.
I would even go back to maybe mid-October when Oklahoma State comes into town and then they go to West Virginia.
That's true. Oklahoma State's been a challenge as well.
Front half of the schedule sets up great.
Sorry, Mullet.
If you beat Iowa, it almost is a schedule that kind of just increases difficulty outside of Texas Tech late in the year because you got Kansas State, Oklahoma State.
But to your question, you're right, which is weird when you consider Iowa State has not won a conference championship in over 100 years. And so even if you losing the Iowa game, yeah, that sucks, and you're thinking of the playoff, but you're a school that hasn't won a conference title in over 100 years. You don't lose a conference championship by losing to Iowa.
Correct. So everything is still on the table technically if you win in week.
But with a number 7 or 7-ish preseason rating, and people talking about you possibly being a playoff team, it's amazing how you can skip a major step and already look ahead. That will be an interesting watch if they lose.
By the way, a couple people wondering, I just mentioned a Fordham player, a former Fordham player, did the Gary Sharp prop bet just hit because I said it on a Tuesday. We said that someone would say it by tomorrow. We said Micah would probably give us
but you mentioned a former Fordham player, not
Fordham
a
player.
Current Fordham player.
So, okay, we're still good to go. The prop bet lives on.
The American Cancer Society's Big Dig is an event in Omaha where kids, both big and little, can see their Tonka truck dreams come true. The event, in partnership with Loiter Construction, gives children the opportunity to get up close with different types of construction equipment. This event benefits Hope Lodge, Nebraska, a free place to stay for those receiving cancer treatments in Omaha, and a fine organization that we have been proud to be associated with in the past. Join them September 12th between 1 and 4 at the new H&H dealership just off Highway 370 and 150th Street. For more details, visit 1620thezone.com.